Hey, everybody. Welcome back to your Dawn of Drones podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. I'd like to say we are live at AUVSI Exponential. We kind of are. More so, I could say we are live in Denver, Colorado, riding hotel and coffee shop Wi Fi with no one other than Dr. Jack Elston from Black Swift Technologies. Jack has an incredible setup there on the expo floor, and we'll talk about that later. But this is a month dedicated to autonomy reimagined. And when you think about that, I can think of no other company that is doing more autonomy than Black Swift Technologies. And Jack has been a friend of the Dawn of Drones since its inception. He's been on every single season. And so I know we're going to drop those links into the chat at some point. But go back and watch those back episodes. They're absolutely incredible. Beyond visual line of sight, the extreme things they're doing. We're going to give you guys some updates today on everything going on with Jack and Black Swift. So welcome back to the show, Jack.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I know you have so many things going on since we spoke last year. You build hardware, you have created your own specialized sensors. And I want to jump into the sensors first, Jack, because you're doing something very unique with methane, which is so important, I think, to the oil and gas and some other critical infrastructure industries with regards to monitoring methane compliance. And you've created a methane sensor. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're working with a partner actually in Boulder who's made the sensor with us specifically for our S2. It's the 10-foot fixed-wing aircraft. We've kind of paired that with a combination of a lot of things we've learned over the years doing volcano monitoring, as far as being able to accurately characterize how much gas is coming out, and then be able to do that really quickly. You can imagine, we're in Alaska, having to fly 25 miles up to the top of the volcano. We don't have a lot of time on site. And so we've learned a lot of tricks as far as how to really quickly tell how much gas is coming out and then get back home.
So the origin story for this sensor is that you created it in the context, or you worked with this other company in the context of your volcano monitoring activities?
Yeah, there's kind of two scientific pursuits that we were using it for, volcano monitoring, and then also the tundra will emit methane. It's one of the areas of study that we've been working with various different groups on.
All right, excellent, excellent. And what differentiates this sensor from maybe some other methane sensors that are out there?
For its size and weight, it's much more sensitive than pretty much anything else out there, and that's really kind of what differentiates it for us. So we can fly a little bit further away, be a little less close to the plume, and still be able to pick up pretty accurately what's going on with the emissions.
So I'm going to ask, the question I don't know the answer to, and hopefully you're not going to be mad at me. You said size and weight, so I'm going to ask you about, what is that size and weight differential?
Yes, to fit within our aircraft, we kind of got to go back a little bit for the constraints there. But basically, all our vehicles are designed so we can take them on commercial airliners. Because normally we're doing things like volcano monitoring or wildfire response and things like that. We have to be pretty responsive. We can't wait for cargo to get there. Right. So all of our aircraft will fit down into things you can actually take on a commercial airliner. Usually we're using things like concert keyboard cases and stuff like that. But that kind of constrains the size and weight of the payload too, because you only have so big of a vehicle to be able to do that. So we're able to carry about 5 pounds, but we have a pretty big volume. It's about an 8.5 inch cylinder that goes out about 2 feet in front of the aircraft. It's all just for payload. And so this particular sensor fits within that, and we're able to do down to about 1 or 2 parts per billion as far as the sensing of methane.
Now, being former military, I'm sensitive to acronyms, but I know you guys created an acronym for this sensor, the MLD, methane leak detection sensor. So tell us, you can mention volcanoes, and what are some of the real world use cases where people are employing this sensor?
We talked about the two there, the tundra and the volcano. But the one we've been working on more recently is for site monitoring. So we'll be able to fly by an oil and gas site. There's several different types of them, basically, but we're able to say, like, hey, this is the amount of emissions that are coming out of here. Basically, the oil and gas companies, one, they're basically taxed on an estimate of how much gas is supposed to be leaking at any given time, given the equipment they have on site. So we can help them kind of refine that number and actually pay less money. And one of the cool things we've seen is a lot of the oil and gas companies are pretty proactive about this too. They see the kind of writing on the wall, either for the regulations or they just want to be good citizens. And so they've been pretty interested in getting out there and kind of seeing what's going on with their sites and having us be able to give them the information they could take to go take a look at that. And then, one of kind of the fun things that comes out of this is we get additional information once we take a look at what equipment is actually there. So we could say, hey, with this particular type of equipment, when we're flying over these sites, we're seeing that this one's leaking more than a different brand. So if you want, in the future, if you want to save some money on maintenance and things like that, maybe go with this brand, that brand.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, talk about actionable intelligence. I mean, if you could actually inform a company like, these pipes are leaking worse than this other company, that could save, I imagine, the oil and gas company like thousands, tens of thousands, who knows how many dollars right there. So that's incredible. And fun fact, everybody, shameless plug, just finished the Law Tech Connect workshop here at AUVSI, doing a specialized energy edition one with the Energy Drone and Robotics Coalition Summit in Houston, Texas. And I think Jack and maybe some of his team will be down there as well. But we definitely have a methane compliance panel for that, because it's very energy specific laws and regulations that we'll be discussing there. So please consider joining us there. It'll be amazing. But Jack, I want to talk about the S2, because this is one of the integrations. I know you have other drones that you create. We'll talk about those momentarily, but you mentioned the S2, and kind of not backpack portable, but definitely commercial airline portable, and this sensor can fit into it. So we've talked about the S2 before, but I'd love to kind of catch people up that may not be familiar with this aircraft that you at Black Swift specifically created. Here we have a picture. I love it. It's you. It's fixed wing. You kind of get a great context here of the wingspan of this particular drone. So what are some of the key features of the S2?
Sure. Yeah, we do a lot of different things to make it easy to use in the field. It's been used everywhere from Greenland at minus 20 degrees down to Arizona. Like I said, mentioned over wildfires and things like that. So some of the key features are toolless assembly and disassembly. We don't want you to have anything out there that you're going to lose. And then, when it's minus 20 degrees outside, you want to be taking off your gloves to do anything because your fingers are freezing. So, just a lot of the stuff that we've learned operating and go into the aircraft, a lot of the redundancy that we put in there from stuff that we've learned over the years, flying in ash clouds and things like that can screw up your different sensors and systems. The weather resilience. I mean, when you go out there and you need to get observations from something, you don't want to be having down days because it's rainy outside and windy outside. So a lot of the stuff you can't quite see on the outside, it's with the avionics. We're pretty unique as a company in the fact that we've developed the autopilot system from the ground up. We don't buy them from somebody else. So we do all the software, firmware, everything. And part of the reason why we keep doing that, even though it's a bit of a pain to maintain, is we do all these specialized applications. So we've spent, probably 15 years now working on really good wind estimates and being able to take those estimates and fly the aircraft in some pretty extreme environments.
Well, that's a great segue. And I know we've discussed this on other shows, but can you give us like 3 examples of how the S2 has survived pretty insane conditions?
Sure. Let's see here. We've when we were up in Alaska the last time, we came over a ridgeline and we saw a significant downdraft. I'm trying to remember exactly how fast it was, but it was probably like 60 miles an hour or something like that, just down. We got behind. There's a ridgeline, and we basically flew right behind it, and there's a rotor coming off the top, pushing everything down. The aircraft got into that. Realized it was using too much energy, it wasn't going to be able to continue flying. And before we had even done anything at the ground station, it had already turned around and gotten itself back into safe air. So we were pretty happy to see the system that we programmed and simulated actually worked in real life to save the aircraft. And so that's certainly one of them. Down in Costa Rica, and we were doing CO2 observations down there, flying through SO2 plumes quite a bit. Somebody sent just one of their DJI drones in there to go take a look at it as well, and it came back and it looked like it had been weathered outside about 15 years. corrosive gas is just horrible for all the metal
components
and stuff like that. Fortunately, even the circuit boards, they kind of opened it up, and I was surprised it's still flying. But fortunately, since most of our stuff's pretty well sealed, we used a lot of composites and things like that because we know we're going into these environments. The S2 is actually just fine. In fact, we're still continuing to fly it. And we've definitely gotten into some icing conditions, rain, and things like that, where you just gotta hope that all the work you did on getting those systems together are going to work out. And fortunately, we've been able to mitigate almost all the stuff that we've run into.
Well, and the other thing, Jack, like most people don't think about probably, I mean, you're in Boulder, you're from Boulder, you created these aircraft in Boulder. So we're already at high elevations. I'm not going to mention the company, but we had a group come out here for an event, and they went to fly their drone and it wouldn't fly just because of the elevation. So, I mean, right there, you're designing that. By the way, I do want to say, I know we've got a ton of people out there on LinkedIn. So, hey, everybody, I hope you're drinking your coffee as you're getting ready to go to the expo. We've got Elazar Lebedev saying, hello, Jack. Hello, Don. Hello, everyone. Shalom from Israel. So not going to the floor, but saying hello from Israel. And Jason Sewer says, beautiful stuff, Jack and Don. So I would agree, Jason. Thank you for the comments. Keep them. Sewer. Sorry, I butchered your name. Keep them coming, everybody. Let us know that you're out there, where you're from. Certainly ask Jack questions, because, when you think about extreme beyond visual line of sight operations and the engineering and craft that goes into surviving those conditions, this is the guy that you want to talk to. And if you are here in Denver and going to the expo, make sure you stop at the Colorado Pavilion and see Jack and talk. I know he's got some of his, do you have some of your drones there on the floor, Jack? I know I'm visiting today.
No, unfortunately.
They're so huge.
Yeah, right? We may have the tube one around a little bit. The tube launch one around a little bit later. The S0, the S2 would be tough to fit in the booth along with ourselves. It's fairly large.
You like take up the whole booth. Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
well,
so
I'm gonna stop by later, but
we got plenty of information about all the different projects we've been working on. Several different white papers about wildfires, hurricanes, and kind of you name it. So there's some really fun information and images in there. And we're happy to chat about the experiences too.
Well, awesome. I'm definitely swinging by later today, Jack. You can guarantee it. I was telling Jack and Mike, our producer behind the scenes here, before we got on yesterday. I think I saw, I don't know, 1/6 of the floor. I feel like this show is so much bigger than last year. I haven't seen so many of my partners or new companies yet, so I'm really excited to pound the floor today. But let's get back to your drone. So we talked about the S2, an incredible drone, but that's not the only one you guys have. You have this E2 drone. And so explain the E2 and like the difference between the E2 and the S2.
So first of all, I apologize about the naming convention. So you got to do a little bit of work there. So if anyone out there has suggestions, happy to hear them.
S2 is the fixed wing.
E2.
Hey, Jack, before we get there, are we seeing this video here? Is this the E or the S2, first of all?
This is the E. So the E is the multi-rotor.
Gotcha.
Originally designed for a company in Spain that's doing work right now with Siemens Gamesa to do wind turbine inspections, but we've retrofitted it here. The images you're seeing of it's doing soil moisture mapping. So we're flying over a pond, so we can get that stark contrast between water and land, and then that nice like saturated soil section. So this is just a test flight here, so we can calibrate the instrument. But the team actually is out right now in California, flying in the hills above, basically wine country, with the USGS, doing some studies with them to try and figure out how to do wildfire mitigation. So they're looking at soil moisture, they're looking at the vegetation, and they're trying to figure out, okay, if we graze cattle on this, or if we clear cut, or whatever we end up doing, what is the best way to try and mitigate some of the horrible fires that we've had around here. So it's a pretty interesting project we've been working with them on.
That is really interesting. We're going to get the soil moisture here momentarily in a lot more detail, but I it makes sense that soil moisture is highly relevant to wildfire protection, prevention and protection. I never really put two and two together for that until you just said it. So thank you. Like, I can't wait to talk more about those different use cases for soil moisture. But getting back to the E2, what are some of the options on it that make it unique? Because you design these drones from the ground up with purposefully built. You talked about this incredible resilience on the S2 to survive like 60-mile-per-hour downdrafts and below freezing temperatures. What kind of things did you bake into this E2 that makes a difference from something, maybe somebody can grab just off the shelf, a quad?
So it contains all the same temperature rated sensors that are within the S2. So we use similar avionics between the two of them. So, it'll fly down to -20 like the other S2 would.
Wow.
It also has a lot of the wind-based planning on board too. So we use that to mitigate a lot of the different issues with it. The E2 is kind of the elongated design. We specifically did so we could balance the battery against the payloads, and so you could have a payload that could look up as well as down. That was kind of critical for the guys that were doing the wind and turbine inspection. But kind of the cool thing for us is it's all just 3D printed and laser cut plates, so it's a really simple aircraft. So we can assemble them fairly quickly, and it makes it easy to modify. So we can adapt them in a number of different scenarios and situations.
Well, and I think you may have alluded to this already, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Why, was there a specific client like NASA or somebody else that came to you and then you designed this drone for that purpose and then found all these other use cases?
Sure. Well, that's where the S2 came from, actually. The S2 was part of the soil moisture mapping system. We originally got the contract with NASA to develop that sensor to tell how much water content's within the soil. And we quickly found out that commercial aircraft, although other drones that we could buy out there, had too much electromagnetic interference from the servos or motors or whatever. So we had to go in and custom design a lot of the different components. And so by the time we started getting through all that, we said, hey, let's just make our own aircraft. We can design it to fit the exact size and shape of the sensor. We could fit it to fly the mission that we need to fly. And so that's how we ended up making the S2. Turned out that payload size and weight was perfect for a number of different things. So we started continuing to adapt it to other things. The next project was the volcano monitoring project. That's where we ended up throwing in a lot of the weather mitigation, dusts and particulate mitigation. And so over the years, it's just been kind of evolving into a platform that's ready to go for a number of different missions.
And once you had kind of perfected, let's call it, the resilient nature of the S2, why the quad? In other words, why the E2? Was it NASA as well, or was it a different client or customer that came to you with a unique use case and you said, yeah, we're going to need a quad for this, not a fixed wing?
Yeah, so since we do a lot of custom work, we've worked on plenty of other quads in the past, usually other people's quads. So we put together our autopilot system and installed them within them. The E2 was for a specific customer. It was for that customer that's in Spain, that's doing wind turbine inspections for Siemens Gamesa. So they needed something that would not only work on land and easily integrate with the systems that they're already in place for their payload, but then also work offshore on a boat where they're doing inspections with offshore wind turbines. So there's a couple different constraints that came in there. And we were able to hit those with that particular vehicle design. One of the more interesting ones we ran into, since it's around something generating power, there's a very strong magnetic field. And so most of these multi-rotors, they use magnetometers to kind of keep their heading. At least until recently, they started using multiple GPS antennas. And so early on when we were making that aircraft, we had to do a lot of specialized control algorithms to deal with the fact that we were flying around very high current lines.
Oh, that's really interesting. I never would have thought of that either. So the initial use case was wind turbine inspections, high magnetic fields around those. This is Autonomy Reimagined Month, sponsored by U Avionics. So tell us about the autonomous features, because your pilots, they're not and customers aren't hand flying these necessarily, right? You've programmed these to push a button and go and fly around the wind turbines to inspect them.
Yeah, so a lot of that too is just working with this partner that we have. The name's Larion, if you want to go look them up. They're a really cool company. Yeah, you basically just set this down in front of the wind turbine. It goes and scans all the sides of the blades, all 6 sides. Within 15 minutes, it comes back. I mean, as opposed to what they used to do in the past is send somebody up to the nacelle in the middle, have them rappel down a blade, come back up, and then they'd have to rotate it so they could rappel back down, go scan the blade. If it took like a day or longer, and you can imagine they don't put these wind parks in places where it's very calm outside. So you can imagine hanging on the end of a rope, getting blown around. It's not very pleasant. So,
absolutely super dangerous, time consuming, therefore equals expensive. And so to be able to push the button, have this do it autonomously is absolutely amazing. You mentioned, Jack, also this mapping surveying that we saw in the video is another use case. Tell us about some of the others. I mean, drone delivery is a big thing now. Is this something that can be used for drone delivery?
No, I'd have to say. I mean, like I'd love to say our stuff's great for everything, but the E2 I wouldn't say for drone delivery. No.
So, what about public safety?
Yeah, there's better options for that.
What about public safety or security purposes?
Certainly, yeah. The payload that we carry for the wind turbine inspection could easily be updated with thermal cameras and things like that, and relayed back in real time. No problem there. We make our own gimbal for it too that easily adapts to the front, where we've put a number of different cameras on it. So certainly could be used for that application.
Now, you mentioned the S2 has been used with a soil moisture sensor. You can use that same sensor on the E2 as well. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's what the video you're seeing flying on is the E2, the soil moisture sensor, and we're testing that out. Smaller coverage area, but we're able to go into a lot more rugged terrain and get very close down to it and get higher resolution soil moisture mapping. So the nice thing is we can decide based on the mission that we're doing, or the customers can decide based on the missions that they have, which aircraft makes most sense for them. One of the really cool things about all of our aircraft is the payload's swappable. So that whole, you can see it in the picture here, the S2. That whole front part, this one happens to look yellow because it's made out of Kevlar, so it can be RF transparent. Just comes off in the field, and you can put a different sensor on. So, for instance, when we were out in Alaska last time, we had two different sensors. One was a camera payload. We had a thermal camera, and then a regular just RGB camera. And then the other one was a trace gas payload. Trace gas payload is really only going to work if the winds weren't blowing super hard, because then it kind of just pushes the plume down against the ground, and we're unable to get into it very easily. So we'd made a game time decision every time we'd go out there at which payload are we going to fly, and we're able to kind of pick it based on weather conditions. And that flexibility was really great as far as being able to deliver a good data product to the USGS.
Smiling, Jack, because you just said flexibility is key, and in the Air Force we always used to say flexibility is the key to air power, right? So I love that you've made your sensors plug and play and so swappable. Let's talk about the soil moisture one in particular, because we talked about the methane leak detection sensor. This soil moisture sensor that you've collaborated on and created is unique as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a collection of different sensors actually. So most people, when they're looking at soil moisture, there's a couple different ways of doing it. So a lot of times they'll do something like a thermal camera where you're looking at heat coming off the ground, and you're using a model with a lot of different inputs you're guessing on to try and figure out what kind of water content's in there, and it's very tricky. What we're doing is we're actually actively measuring the difference in the radiation hitting the aircraft and bouncing off the ground at L band, which is that where GPS sits and things like that. The reason why I picked it, it's a nice clear frequency usually used for radio stuff, looking up into space basically. And so we're able to get a really nice signal coming out of that, and L band's significantly affected by the water content. So even though we have that nice signal, there's several different things that goes into that. One, the temperature of the soil still does matter for us. That affects the signal coming off of it. The other one is there's water contained with any vegetation you're flying over too. And so most people just want to know how much water's in the soil, not how much water is in the plants. And so you can imagine each type of plant stores a different amount of water. It depends on how high the plant is, what part of the growing season it's in. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it. But basically, to say, we take the radiation that's coming off affected by the water, we subtract out how much water is contained within the plants, and then we get how much water is within the soil. Pretty complex sensor. It's taken us about 12 years to really dial in, but we're seeing it's matching up with ground probes, stuff that you have to dig into the ground that takes several hours to put in, matching up almost perfectly with those sensors. And so you're able to get a huge coverage area with these things without having to go and install stuff, or either the only other option is kind of taking this hand carried probe you have to push into the ground every time you want a measurement, which is also quite tedious. And so it's very unique in the fact that it's one of the few sensors like this where you're able to put it on a drone and go get water content.
Oh, that is incredible. And everybody out there, just a foot stomp. If you didn't hear him say this took 12 years to 12, and that goes right to Marie Louise A is out there saying great engineering Black Swift, and Matthew Burgess, great stuff from Black Swift. So, completely agree, guys. Thanks for the encouragement and positive thoughts there. That's unbelievable. And by the way, everybody, I did write an article. I'm gonna say for Drone Life News at some point about this soil moisture sensor. If you want to go find that, Dawn Zolda, Black Swift, soil moisture, Drone Life, it'll pop up. I guarantee it. I also guarantee on my P3 Tech website under articles. So if you scan through there, you will absolutely find it. But let's get back to hardware, Jack, because we talked about the S2, we talked about the E2, and now you also have this S0, and it's a VTOL, vertical takeoff landing aircraft. So what inspired this one?
Yeah, so again, sorry for lack of creative naming convention. S being kind of like the fixed wing line that we have, 0 because it's smaller than the S1 and the S2. But it's about a 3-foot wingspan and weighs 2.5 to 3 pounds. We really tried to keep this one simple. It was inspired by wanting to make a tube launch aircraft for NOAA to replace some of the. They did some original tests with some military hardware that they got provided, and it actually went out with their P3, dropped it out of the bottom of the aircraft into a hurricane, and it was able to survive for a fair amount in the hurricane. So they were pretty encouraged by that, but the data that they got back wasn't very great as far as being able to just feed it directly into their weather models. Plus, if they had to buy those aircraft, it was going to exceed the budget, any budget that it had to do these observations. So we were contracted by them to put together a much less, like a better sensor as far as the meteorological stuff, since that's kind of what we do. That's our bread and butter. And then also something that was much more affordable. So we came up with this idea. It's pretty simple 3D print construction for the most part, just like a tube that we could buy from a number of different sources for its fuselage. But then we packed the front of it with some very specialized meteorological sensors that we've tested against towers, all sorts of different places to make sure it's accurate. And the cool thing is, we went out and did clearer tests with this over the spring with NOAA, dropped it out of the P3, made sure everything was going to come out okay. Because you can imagine trying to throw like a 2.5-pound plane out of a P3 that's doing 145 knots.
Yikes.
It's a tricky engineering problem to get it to pop out and go start flying its mission. But it'll fly for an hour and a half. And in all the simulations and everything, it should fly just fine in a hurricane. Since we've done tornadoes before, we're very confident with that. And the nice thing is we kind of have a price point. We're really big moving forward here. They're going to be able to dump a number of these things into a single storm so they can get several different measurement points at once.
An S0 swarm, if you will, dumped out of a P3 aircraft. I love it. Hey, Jack, I think we have an example in a video. Is that right? Maybe we can roll that? Yeah. Okay, here we go.
This is them deploying it. Yeah. So the station that he's sitting at right there is where they receive all the meteorological information. And then there's legitimately just a hole in the ground basically that he pulls the flap on and puts our aircraft down. Has a little sensor on it to know when it's out of the aircraft, starts the whole timing mechanism for the sequence that eventually deploys the aircraft.
All right, very cool. See him still working.
And then yeah, here he goes here.
Okay, so
you can imagine this is quite the process when it's bouncing down.
Is the drone like in that tube?
It is, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
All folded up inside there, and the tube slows it down to something reasonable before it pops. It actually drops the tube off and keeps the parachute. And the parachute keeps the aircraft. It's just pointed downwards, and the aircraft, when it's ready to go, releases itself from the parachute.
All right. Well, besides the unique kind of, let's just say, external design of this aircraft, what other attributes did you build into it for this purpose?
Well, again, kind of the really unique thing to it is the accurate wind sensing and the other meteorological measurements that it's making. These are critical to go into the weather models that they're using to try and predict where these hurricanes are going to go, what intensity they're going to have when they hit land. And one of the biggest question marks right now that is the biggest source of error for their hurricane models is just right off the sea surface. And they want us to fly somewhere between like 50 to 300 feet off the water. in the eye wall and go get measurements for them in the middle of it. So it's going to be a really exciting mission for the aircraft. But we took those same instrumentation in that nice tube, and you'd mentioned before there's also a VTOL variant of it. So the S0 actually kind of comes in two flavors. There's this tube launch air deployed one, and then there's one that's a little bit more accessible for other groups. That's vertical takeoff. So it's got twin rotors that tilt up. It lifts itself off the ground, and you can go do profiling, transects, all sorts of different stuff as far as this meteorological work. It'll go up to 15,000 feet and do a profile in about 20 minutes. And so you can get really quick data about what's going on in the atmosphere above you for all sorts of different reasons, whether you want to launch another bigger drone that's a little more susceptible to wind or around airports for operations. We worked with the Air Force to kind of help them to do meteorological information for their cargo drops, so they know exactly where to release the cargo so it'll hit the spot that they need to go to. So there's a lot of different applications for that one.
Wow. And I want to transition here to talk a little bit about some of these military use cases and dig a little bit deeper. But before I do, I got to ask you this, Jack, going off script. Are you talking to Don Bershoff at True Weather yet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've talked to Don a number of different times.
Please.
He's and so we also are familiar with Mediomatics too. We've been over and talked with those guys. It's a company in Switzerland that does a really good job with their multi-rotors out of a box that Don's working pretty closely with. So we're hoping to continue to work with them and integrate, one of these systems as part of the information that's feeding into True Weather.
That is awesome because they have a whole weather pavilion going on. I know you've got the Colorado pavilion and are a part of that. And Mediomatics has a presence on the floor as well here at the show. And fun fact, everybody, I don't know if you know, but they're opening up a U.S. shop, if you will. They're opening up a U.S. presence, Mediomatics. So I think we're going to see so many exciting developments on the weather front, thanks to folks like Don and then collaborating with folks like Jack. And if you're at the show today, weather panel, I'm moderating, Don's on it. It's like 2 p.m. today. I don't know the room number, but look it up on your app and join us, please. Jack, let's talk. You just mentioned the Air Force is using the S0 for kind of weather measurements, essentially to determine where to drop cargo from the air to see, kind of the wind speeds and what's going on out there. What are some of the other military applications? Because you've been working with the military for a long time. I mean, we hear a lot about NOAA and NASA and all those amazing R&D efforts you're doing with them. And now on the commercial side with, O&G, oil and gas, and, precision agriculture folks looking at soil moisture. But what's, besides this cargo application that you just mentioned, what other kinds of uses for your different drones and sensors are being utilized by the military to the extent that you can talk about that?
Sure, yeah. One of the nice things is all these different efforts that we've been doing to kind of push the envelope as far as capabilities of the UAS translate to a number of different areas, including the DoD. So I guess two of the projects we're doing right now, we're working with a base up in North Dakota to do perimeter surveillance because you can imagine the weather up there, especially in the wintertime, is tricky. Yeah. They had, I forget how many different aircraft that they tried to fly this year, and they worked maybe 30% of the time or less. Just because it is a difficult environment up there. So we're working with them to try and bring some of the technology we've deployed in, the Arctic and Antarctica, things like that.
Well, Jack, I got to tell you, I got to break in here because you're talking about North Dakota, and I don't know what base you're talking about. You don't have to share, but in the Air Force, we always used to say, why not, my not, freezing's the reason. And, I was a prosecutor and I would go to Grand Forks and Minot to do cases. I was like this elite prosecutor doing all the big felonies right across the central United States. That's where I got to learn a lot about Colorado and why I moved here ultimately. But I remember one time it dropped like 13 inches just out of nowhere. And overnight, if you didn't plug your engine block into a heater, your car would not start the next day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I couldn't even imagine like trying to fly a drone in those conditions, but you've cracked the code and the military appreciates that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we've completely solved it, but we spend an awful lot of time flying in those conditions, so we understand a lot of the nuances, and we're working towards making something that you could just set out there and forget, and it'll go do its job no matter what. One of the other interesting applications is the soil moisture mapping, oddly enough. I've been talking to a bunch of different people on that, and it turns out some of the forward air bases are not paved. They're, all sorts of weird aggregates or mud. And so there's a project we're working on right now where we can go over and fly over a runway real quick and kind of tell them if the C-130 can land or not, if the soil's good enough to land on, or if it's going to get stuck. Right now they have a poor airman go run out there with a hand tool basically and go try and survey a couple different points along this very long runway and say it's okay to go. So that's one of the other projects that we're working on right now too.
That once again, an application I never would have thought about, but it makes an abundant amount of sense, right? So that's amazing. Everybody, Jack also and his team designed the Swift Core flight management system. So when you're thinking about, his drones, it's not, or sensors, it's really a holistic ecosystem that he's created. So I'd encourage you, again, to watch those back episodes, check out his website to learn more about that. We're getting short on time, and I really want to get to, Jack, what's new, because, kind of catch people up, because we talked before about the P3, hurricane work with NOAA. You're also doing some interesting things, more interesting things than what we've talked about, getting that research into volcanoes. So can you kind of catch us up from the last time we talked on some of the, let's just say next phases, if you will, of some of that extreme beyond visual line of sight work you've been doing in these outlandish conditions?
Sure. Yeah. One of the things we're really working hard on right now is the fact that it takes an awful lot of planning for some of these missions. I mean, you're in rugged terrain, high altitude, bad weather. Usually the weather is something that's, you can get predictions, but we're in the Aleutian Islands. The prediction's coming from Anchorage, which is a long ways away. So it's usually very inaccurate.
Yeah.
So we're working on online tools to take a look at in real time the terrain, obstacles, weather, communications. I mean, you name it, a number of different metrics. Feed those back into the whole system, and have it update flight planning on the fly. So as it's going through and seeing the terrain's not quite what they're seeing on the digital surface map or whatever, it can readjust and make sure that it stays safe. Or if it sees the winds have shifted, it can kind of realize, hey, I got to return home faster, or if I fly this different route, I'll actually optimize my battery usage. I'll be able to stay out longer. And there's a ton of different metrics that go into these things. So we've got a couple different projects with NOAA and NASA looking into various different aspects of that to improve the autonomy on these things. So they can go out, automatically execute your mission. The operator's not overwhelmed with what's going on. And, ideally get to the point where these things just kind of go out and do it on their own. That's where we really want to get to.
Wow, that's just so unbelievable. This is why everybody, he's in Autonomy Reimagine Month and at AUVSI Exponential, the theme of autonomy, right, this year. So, wow, okay, so much. So we are getting crazily close to the end of our time together. So I want to make sure we hit everything you want to cover, Jack. But before we do, Matthew Burgess is out there singing your praises, by the way. Black Swift is a great company to work with. I encourage folks to reach out to Jack and his team for future collaboration. So thank you, Matthew, for that ringing endorsement.
Well, he deserves some praise too. He was out there with us for the volcano work, so he got quite a bit on that mission.
Very, very cool. Well, that's awesome. So what's kind of next, Jack? You're here. Well, first of all, let's talk about AUVSI. So you're on the floor. People can visit you. The Colorado Pavilion, everybody, big sign in hanging from the ceiling. So I don't think you can really miss it if you're walking the floor. You will find them. What do you hope to achieve here at AUVSI next year?
I mean, honestly, I love just the conversations. If we're going to be honest,
they're so fun, aren't they?
First and foremost, not really a business reason, which I guess is bad being the CEO, but I really enjoy just kind of chatting with everyone about what we're doing and figuring out what they're doing and seeing how we could collaborate. So, that's the main reason for us being here. It's a nice community of people, like-minded people trying to push the envelope of what these things can do. So I really do kind of enjoy that. I'm happy to answer questions about what we're doing, have people come by, chat about, opportunities with us, opportunities to work with us. So that, it's kind of why I'm here.
That's awesome. So after the show, probably you're like me right now, right? We're heads down, like like a day and a half left, which is almost in dog years. Like, right? I'm not sure how long that really is in dog years at a show like this, but uh, you know, after you close down shop here, what's next for you and Black Swift, Jack? What's coming up this summer? What's coming up the rest of this year?
Yeah, so the show's getting in the way of me actually getting our work done, honestly. So we've got a couple different sensors that we got to deliver. There's another platform that NOAA's using for hurricane observations that we're doing the meteorological sensors for, since we've got that really accurate wind measurement. Their platform will fly for 4 hours, so it's doing a little bit different missions than we are. So we got to deliver those. We got to deliver several of our aircraft for hurricane season and get ready for that ourselves. All that could be out on the P3 flying into storm, so that'll be an interesting experience for me for sure. And then we've got more volcano observations with the USGS coming up here out in Alaska. We'll be going out to the Aleutian Islands again, checking in on, they like regular updates on those volcanoes. Last year, our platform was the only one that actually got any sort of visual data from the volcano out by Dutch Harbor there. They couldn't get any manned aircraft out because the weather out there is just always tricky. So we'll be doing that. We've got a number of different soil moisture missions with the USGS as well. And NOAA actually as well, looking at one of the hot topics recently is the Colorado River watershed. And so we'll be doing some soil moisture mapping to help us looking at some of those things. So pretty full schedule. Going to be running as soon as I get done with the show. It won't be any doubt.
Well, I'm honestly exhausted just listening to that. I don't know how you do it, Jack. That's just unbelievable. It's like new tagline for Jack, from Christmas Vacation, like the Jelly of the Month Club, the gift that keeps on giving. Black Swift Technologies, their drones and sensors. So very cool, very cool. You said there are other shows maybe coming up too. Where might people, besides, if they don't have the opportunity to come to Expo in Denver this year and visit your booth today or tomorrow, when else might they be able to actually meet you in person?
Sure. Yeah, you'd mentioned the Drone and Energy Robotics show. Fortunately, it's kind of in the middle of one of our deployments, so I'm going to try and get down to that one.
Dang.
Yeah, and then there's several different other good shows coming up here, so I haven't really decided yet, honestly.
All right, well, stay tuned, everybody. Like, I'll make sure I work closely with Jack. And by the way, if you haven't signed up for my brand new P3 Tech newsletter, do so, because that's where these kind of updates will come right into your inbox every single week. Not only the shows that we have coming up, but the articles and things like find Black Swift Technologies at X show. Okay, so press releases, things like this. Go to the P3 Tech website, and in the About tab, you'll find the newsletter sub-tab. Drop in your email, and you will get these weekly updates. I think you're going to find them to be invaluable, and we appreciate your subscription to that newsletter. Jack, we are about 2 minutes out, which I knew, as always, our time would fly. So I'm going to give you the floor to kind of close out any concluding comments you have for everybody. And so over to you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, this has been great. Thanks for having me on again. Really appreciate it. I'll start out by encouraging everyone else to continue to pay attention to all the work that you guys are continuing to do throughout the convention here. Again, come by and visit us. We've got that nice booth there. Happy to answer questions, give out some information about what we're doing. And, Boulder's a nice place too. If you want to come by, come visit us. Feel free to stop in sometime.
It is really cool. I did get the opportunity to visit Jack. Was it last year? I feel like it was like last fall or something, Jack. So yeah, absolutely. If you're in town, reach out to me, reach out to Jack. We would love to see you. We always love to meet with people, and that would be amazing. So, and speaking of what the work we're doing, thank you for that, Jack. I really appreciate it. If you all didn't get a chance to look at our live stream from the floor yesterday, we had a whole string of industry leaders on that show as well with the full crew. That's on the full crew YouTube channel, also Dawn Zoldi YouTube, and on my LinkedIn feed. So check that out if you don't have a chance to come here, just to get some impressions from folks. I know Jack gave, well, actually, Jack, we are at time, but I want to ask you real quick. I know you haven't had a ton of time to run the floor because you've got, I think that's the blessing and a curse of a booth, is that you don't get to really get outside of it too much. But is there any like impression as we close out from this show that you've noticed maybe different from other years? Like anything that's surprising you about this AUVSI Exponential 2023?
I don't know about surprising. I'm just kind of happy to see it come back to kind of where it was before the pandemic. You know, it was a little bit slow the last couple of years, and it's definitely, you know, gotten back, if not exceeded the number of people and exhibitors and everything. So there's a whole variety of stuff. Unfortunately, I haven't had a ton of time to tour the floor, but looking forward to doing that today. And yeah, just excited to see everyone back in person.
All right, awesome. Well, everybody keep following my social too, because I'm definitely gonna have a picture in Jack's booth with Jack here today. When I'll post it, but sometime this week. So anyway, thank you everybody. Thank you so much, Jack. I'm looking forward to stopping by sometime later today. And everybody else out there, thanks for joining in. Thanks for your awesome comments. And I think that's all she wrote. We are.